Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alexandra, and I'm your webinar hostess, which means I will handle all of the Q&A. During this presentation, I've enabled the questions panel, which you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen. You may need to push the little arrow or the plus sign to expand the panel. This session is being recorded and will be made available to all attendees should you care to listen to it again or share it with colleagues. I'd like to introduce our speakers for today, Mark Towler, Senior Product Expert here at Progress, and Jason Alberino, who is our WUG Ninja, who will be presenting to you best practices in credentials. Mark, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Just want to confirm some housekeeping ideas. If you are having trouble hearing us, you may wish to try connecting to your computer audio rather than your phone audio. Questions, if I believe Alex already mentioned, there's a question manager panel in the right-hand side of your screen. Please go ahead and apply and enter any questions you've got there. We will be answering questions at the end of this session. And yes, we are recording this, and we will have a recording that will be made available to everyone who is registered for the session within the next 24 hours. So with that out of the way, let's talk about credentials for a moment, what they are and why you need them. Credentials, quite simply, are the account and password details that every network system or device requires in order to allow someone to access them. They're not tremendously different from your username and password when you log into your computer or any other system, but they are applicable to all the various devices that make up the network. Credentials are kind of essential. If you cannot get access to a device or a system, you can't get any information about it, including often what it is in the first place. So when you're looking at using, say, a network monitoring solution to discover your entire network, it's vital that you have credentials for every single device in your network so that when that system goes out and starts looking at each individual item or device or IP address and says, who are you and what are you, what is it that you do, and tell me details about yourself, it's actually going to get something other than you have no access. Sometimes without credentials, you can find out very basic things like this is a wireless access port, or you can find out, point, or you can find out things like this is a server, but that's about it. Credentials are absolutely essential for network discovery. They're also going to give you a lot more information than just, this is a server or this is a switch. They're going to allow you to identify not only what that device is, but usually what it's doing and what kind of actions are available that can be changed or modified on that device. Once you've got access, there's usually a variety of different things that you can do or that a system or solution can do on your behalf. Any of these systems will be storing credentials. Again, it's not a one-time thing. You don't put them in every single time. You need to do a discovery. What you do is you have credentials that you're able to then store and use to reach out and log into any of these devices or systems going forward. Now, that's the basics. Sometimes it can be a slight bit more complicated. Community strings, for example, these are kind of SNMP strings that are used to allow access to statistics within a managed device or router, and it can be something that will allow you not only to access that particular device or router, but other connected devices that share the same community string. So again, this is something that's extremely useful and simplifies things quite a bit. Similarly, it's not just for physical devices. Often there are cloud resources that are a part of a network that need to be monitored and managed, and in those cases, you're going to have separate credentials to access your Amazon Web Services system, your Azure system, or your Meraki system, or any other online cloud-based solution. Similarly with virtual machines. So the whole point of credentials is these are the tools, this is the information that's going to allow you to reach out into your network and understand what is out there, what's connected, and what you can do with it and to get access. They're pretty much the starting point of any network monitoring or network management solution. And credentials come in a variety of different types. The most common is SNMP, or Simple Network Management Protocol. This has been around for a while. There's a number of different versions of them. They tend to be backwards compatible, but they may be SNMP 1, 2, or 3, but almost anything will respond to an SNMP ping. And this is usually the easiest way to figure out what's going on there. To get more information, to actually get information about system attributes or the system instrumentation. So not only that the device exists, but what it's doing, what its response time is, various other bits of information like throughput or status. That's where you're getting into slightly more impressive or more complex credentials, things like Windows WMI or VMware or SSH credentials. So another way of using those as well is if you're looking for remote execution. That's going to require potentially a different type of credential as well. And that's where you'd be looking at SSH, or more commonly and very old school, Telnet. These are credentials that will allow you to access a device or a system and to make changes, to take control, to remotely operate it, that sort of thing. There's some specific credentials for storage management devices. RAID arrays, that sort of thing. That's the Storage Management Initiative Specification, or SMI-S. And I already kind of mentioned cloud. Generally, that's AWS and Azure. And it's important to note that we're not just talking cloud servers and cloud storage. There are other cloud, and I'm going to kind of use quotes around this, cloud devices or resources that are things like load balancers and others. So it may not just be a matter of what's stored up in the cloud or what is that cloud virtual server doing. It can also be other pieces that are essential to understanding how your network works that you're going to need to monitor or manage, for which you will need those same credentials that you use to manage your the rest of your cloud solution. Kind of overlapping with that, Meraki is one. I think there are a few others now who are doing this, that provides wireless access points that are physical, but those wireless access points are completely managed within the cloud. So you've kind of got a hybrid option there where you do have physical devices, but they are managed directly through an online cloud-based solution, and you will need credentials to that Meraki solution in order to manage those wireless access points. And then, of course, there's a whole world of applications, each one of which can have multiple different types of credentials, because, of course, there are tons and tons of different solutions out there. I mean, the reason we have all these different credential types is partly legacy. As you can see, SNMP has been around for quite some time. Things like the cloud solutions are obviously much newer, and everything kind of grows. Anyone who spent enough time doing network administration is aware that you never take things away, it always gets added on, and systems and solutions are built upon layers of earlier and older ones. And of course, multiple vendors, multiple specifications, you've got multiple devices, multiple solutions, multiple systems, all doing different jobs, and all of them may very well require different credential types. So this is one of the reasons it's very important to stay on top of credentials and understand what it is that you need, because while you may be sitting here thinking you're completely monitoring a network or managing it, if you don't have the credentials to a certain aspect of it, like say Meraki, you're going to be extremely limited. So let's talk about applying some credentials. You've got the credentials, kind of what are they really good for, and when you're doing something like monitoring or managing, what are the kind of best solutions for, or best ways to apply those credentials to get the results that you want. Just in terms of quick tips, as I kind of mentioned, you can discover almost anything with SNMP credentials, especially SNMP 2 and onwards. It's a very quick and easy way to broadly discover what's going on, what's connected to your network, and get basic information. As I said, you will need Windows host credentials, or for Windows hosts, host devices, and other Windows devices. And that's usually done through the WMI standard, which is, again, goes a level deeper than simply responding to a ping or responding with very basic device management. They can give you a lot more information if you've got the WMI credentials. Now, of course, we're seeing a lot more Linux, Unix, and Windows hybrid solutions. So if you've got Linux or Unix or hosts, and you need them to play nicely with a Windows solution or a Windows monitoring or managing system, you may need an SNMP agent or an SNMP service that will act as an intermediary, and it will be the solution that will go and get that SNMP static information and provide it in a Windows compatible or WMI compatible format. It just adds another additional layer of complication when reaching into Linux and Unix systems. But of course, you can also use SSH credentials in order to manage and monitor those Linux or Unix host devices. VMware is the most common virtual machine solution out there. I should say the most common. Hyper-V has been giving it a run for its money as well. But for both of those, you'll need the appropriate credentials in order to access all of those virtual machines within either vCenter or within Hyper-V. And honestly, I could go on for an hour or two here. This is not an exhaustive list. You do need credentials, and you will have different types of credentials to do different things. It's kind of like walking in and saying, I'd like to buy a four-wheeled vehicle. Well, that covers a lot of ground. What do you want to do with it? That's going to determine whether you're buying a motorcycle, a Honda, a truck, a semi, and it's the same thing here. It's going to determine what kind of credentials you need and what you're going to do with them. What we're really doing is kind of coming at this from a network monitoring standpoint, because really the important thing with credentials is you've got to have them to understand what's connected to your network. And if you can't monitor something, you can't manage it. Network management there's overlap between monitoring and management, but at the end of the day, if you can't see it and figure out what it's doing, you don't have a hope in terms of managing it, and understanding what's going on with your network is absolutely essential. We obviously are recommending a network monitoring solution. These are systems that will find everything on your network and use credentials to not only understand what's connected and how it's connected, but what it's actually doing, what's reaching its thresholds, what isn't, and what's the health of your network at a glance. WhatsUp Gold is the solution that we provide and that we recommend, obviously. It's got a wide variety of benefits. It's very simple and easy to use. The value it provides is that it will allow you to see trouble coming and basically find and fix problems before your users even notice. It's got very powerful alerting and dashboarding capabilities. It can let you know if there's a problem either via things like text or email, Slack, or even Teams. Very simple to set up, very simple to license. It includes features like configuration management, cloud monitoring, traffic analysis, application monitoring, and virtual monitoring. That's the pitch. And the reason I want to bring this up, though, is credentials are essential. They're an absolute requirement if you're going to be doing network monitoring or network management. And like I said, monitoring tends to be required to do the management. However, credentials are literally the key to the kingdom, and you are putting them all into one solution, which means that anyone who can get access to your network monitoring solution, or to a lesser extent your network management solution, can therefore get access to every single device on your network. And we've seen this happen recently. That's why the SolarWinds hack recently was so destructive. Once they were into SolarWinds, the bad actors could access every single other device. So two things is, one, it's very, very important to maintain up-to-date credentials so that your network monitoring solution or management solution can access your network. It's also even more important to keep your monitoring or management system secure. So that means passwords up to date, and that means changing them if necessary. That means using strong passwords, and if possible, integrating with a open or a third-party single sign-on solution, something like OpenID or others that will allow you to maintain a level of security across your entire system. The biggest threat to network security, to be perfectly honest, is not people accessing credentials through a network monitoring solution. It's credentials that are admin or guest or 123 123 that haven't been set from the factory. So one of the advantages of using a network monitoring solution is that it allows you to not only put all of your credentials in one place and see what's going on with them, but to get an idea of how many of those credentials haven't been changed from factory settings or just simply haven't been changed in a long, long time. So that's one reason we really want to kind of talk about credentials today, is just to give you an idea of what they are, what they're for, and the importance of keeping them up to date and keeping them secure. And I'm going to stop there to give us some additional time for questions. If you're not able to stay, or if your questions don't get asked, feel free to reach out and contact us. The URL is right there on the screen. And if you'd like to give What's Up Gold a try for yourself, you can find it pretty much as a big red button on every single page on whatsupgold.com, and you can download a free trial. So with that said, what I'd like to do is stop and see if we've got any questions that are coming up with regards to credentials.
So I don't see any questions in the chat here, so I'm assuming everyone understands everything and has no questions. However, I will take this opportunity to just mention that with What's Up Gold, we recently created a customer validation program where we're actually doing pre-release activities, gathering feedback from customers on things we're working on. And we'll provide some links to access that and why you should join, as well as we have a feature request portal where you can put your feature requests out there, vote on other people's ideas, or put your own out there to potentially get promoted to features within the solution later on.
Thank you, Jason. That is good information to have. And it looks like we do have a few questions coming in. They may not know everything after all. Good thing. Let me see if I can expand this a bit.
So I see, where's the document for configuring WMI to gather RAM and disk info? So that is right within our documentation portal on docs.ipswitch.com. We can reach out with I'll put the link in chat afterwards, but in general, when it comes to WMI access, the obvious answer is, well, WMI only allows access to administrators by default. Some people don't want to grant administrator access, and that's fine. But in order to accommodate that, you'll need to jump through some hoops in the Windows operating system to accomplish that. So you can have non-admin users access WMI data, but you have to configure that access on a device by device basis. There's no way to do that in bulk right now. I see a lot of people just use, a service account that has, domain admin privileges, and as long as you're controlling access to that, not sharing the password, that is acceptable. Keeping in mind, we do also have a log management solution. So if someone's trying the password over and over again and it's failing, you can create alerts for that and be notified if someone's trying to, gain access using one of your credentials.
Thank you, Jason. Another question here. When setting up credentials, can we set up a read-only type login, or does it need to be admin level? I know you kind of answered that for the Windows standpoint. Do you need to expand on that at all, or?
Yeah, so, well, with I already mentioned Windows, but it's worth mentioning. Well, SNMP by default is typically read-only anyhow, so you can't set up SNMP write credentials within What's Up Gold as well. However, that's not a requirement. Really what we need is those SNMP read credentials. We recommend using SNMP version 3 since that is the most secure version of SNMP. In addition to that, keep in mind that there's various other credential types within What's Up Gold, and regardless of which credential type, a vast majority of the time you only are going to need read access, regardless of what type of credential it is. Really, the only time you would need write access is if you were going to interact with the device in some way. Let's say, for example, you want to run an SSH command against the device. Well, you might need more than just read access. Or maybe you want to restart a VMware virtual machine if something happens. Well, you would need more than read access, etc. So in terms of monitoring, read is fine. In terms of interacting with the device and potentially doing a corrective action, you might need more than read access.
This looks like a follow-on to that because in the spirit of minimizing permissions concerns, is it better to use SNMP for Windows instead of WMI? And is there anything SNMP won't provide that WMI will?
That's a great question, and I used to recommend only using SNMP because WMI was so bloated. But since Microsoft deprecated support for SNMP in Server 2012, they really haven't touched it, and I have seen issues with using just SNMP. And as I mentioned earlier, using WMI is fine as long as you're controlling access to the credential or setting up a read-only credential, so to speak. So you have multiple options there. But WMI does indeed provide more information than SNMP does on Windows devices. Specifically, things like the CPU utilization within WhatsUp Gold. Well, if you do that in SNMP with Windows, it's going to show unknown processor type. Why is that? Because that's how Microsoft populates SNMP. But if you're using a WMI credential, you actually get the full-on processor name, Intel Xeon model number, etc. Same thing goes when it comes to disk utilization using WMI versus SNMP. SNMP on Windows does not supply disk mount information. A lot of SQL and Exchange best practices say, well, you should be using disk mounts. WMI can give you that information where SNMP cannot. And in general, at least where it stands nowadays, I always recommend WMI over SNMP because it is now very stable. It's not what it once was many years ago. Um, I would say if you're on server 2012 or higher, you should be using WMI instead of SNMP at this point.
Thank you, Jason. Here's a question about does the credential monitoring part of is the credential monitoring part of standard WUG, or is it an add-on? And in fact, can you maybe give us a little bit more details on how you can manage credentials within WhatsUp Gold?
Oh, sure. So in terms of credential monitoring, that I would consider that more of an add-on to WhatsUp Gold through the log management suite that we added earlier this year. So with log management, you could collect Windows event logs and syslog messages, as well as create thresholds for alerts. So for example, maybe you don't want to be notified anytime someone tries a username or password and it's bad. Maybe you want to be notified if it happens 10 times in the past 10 minutes, something along those lines. That is possible with the log management add-on. Same thing goes for syslog messages. Someone's logging into your router or switch with a bad username or password. Well, you probably want to know about it. Well, that's where log management comes to the rescue once again. But that is an add-on to WhatsUp Gold. If you have the premium edition, if you are licensed for the Total Plus edition, we actually granted you access to the log management with no additional charge. So using your existing Total Plus license, you now have access to log management as long as you upgrade to version 21 or higher.
That's great for the actual credential monitoring. But I was kind of wondering if we need to be a bit more clear about how WhatsUp Gold stores credentials and allows you to use them and change them if necessary within WhatsUp Gold.
Oh, sure. So the credentials are stored encrypted within our database, and that is a permission that you can grant people. So people either have access to the credentials library within WhatsUp Gold or they not. And even those people with access would not be able to see plain text passwords anywhere or anything like that. All the information is encrypted within the database. In general, I would say if you're concerned about someone looking at the credential library, maybe even to just see username, something like that, just don't grant them access to the credential library. That is a permission you can set.
That is important to note because we do understand a lot of our users aren't necessarily aware that there are multiple levels of permission when using WhatsUp Gold. You don't just have to give everyone full administrative rights access. So we have a question here. If I need to monitor and troubleshoot bandwidth utilization issues on a Dell switch stack, but I'm not allowed to have the admin credentials, what other options do I have regarding credential types?
So there you would want SNMP, and as I mentioned earlier, we only need read-only access to SNMP. I used to do the professional services here, so I actually worked with a lot of customers who had managed networks. So they didn't actually have control of the switch, but they were actually able to ask their vendor to configure SNMP and get the credentials. So regardless of your situation, more than likely, if you just ask for SNMP access, you will get it. And that's all you need actually in WhatsUp Gold in order to take full advantage of everything it offers you when it comes to routers, switches, firewalls, etc. You'll be able to discover them, monitor all the different interfaces, including interface utilization, depending on make, model, fan, power supply, temperature sensors, you name it. SNMP actually provides a lot more info as well. And keep in mind, What's Up Gold allows you to look at any SNMP value, so you're not even limited to what comes directly out of the box.
There's a question here about how difficult is it to configure WMI for read-only?
I wouldn't say it's difficult. I would say it's time consuming. There's a lot of document articles, from various vendors as well as from Microsoft themselves on how to accomplish it. But it's basically a 23-step process you have to go through. And like I said earlier, there's no way to do that in bulk, at least that I know of. If you find one, I would be curious to know myself. But it's not a difficult process. You follow the steps and you could create a non-admin user that has access to WMI, but it is on a device by device basis.
Question here, Alfield, does the premium edition include the log management add-on? It does not. That's why it's called an add-on. However, there's a Total Plus edition that includes all of the add-ons, and it is included in there. So log management can be purchased separately or purchased as a bundle within the product. If you go to whatsupgold.com, you'll find a link to an editions page that will show you exactly what's in each edition and what's optional. For specifics of what that's going to cost, you may want to reach out to our sales team and request a quote. They'll give you the specifics based on your actual network solution and what you're looking for. So here's a follow-up question. Is there a link for how to set that up? Monitoring interfaces, SNMP was being used before, but I need to look into WMI.
So there's absolutely some links, and we could try and share those in the chat or send them along with the recording for you. But when it comes to monitoring interfaces, I'm wondering if you're talking about Windows systems, because keep in mind the only systems that typically allow WMI credentials are going to be those Windows systems. There could be some exceptions depending on how your environment's set up, but in general, when we're talking about SNMP, we're really talking about network devices, router, switch, firewall. And then when we're talking WMI, we're talking Windows Server based OSs.
Thank you, Jason. This has been really informative. We are starting to come up on our time here, folks. We've had some great questions. We've got another minute or two to slip some more in. If there's anything else that you'd like to ask, now's the time to do it. But if not, we may wrap up in a minute. That doesn't mean that we won't answer your questions. If you do have any questions, feel free to use that contact link that's on the screen right now in case you think of something in the next half hour or something occurs to you or your keyboard simply isn't working. But if there aren't any other questions at this point, I'll just ask Jason if he has any final thoughts or any key points he wants to convey on credentials, and otherwise we may just wrap this up.
I think the only other thing I'll add is try and take advantage of community.progress.com. They've done a lot of work in recent years to make it more searchable and easy access. Some of these questions, you could literally go type in the search box on community.progress.com and see multiple different KB articles to walk you through these things. So just keep in mind that it's a resource that's very handy, especially if you have questions about credentials and how to set them up, etc.
Thank you again, Jason. With that, okay, yes, just to follow up, that individual was thinking of Windows devices. So just to wrap this up then, if there are questions, again, feel free to reach out. If you're curious, feel free to drop by the community. I want to stress that's completely public. You don't need to be a customer or have a license to access it. You can feel free to access the knowledge base from anywhere, and that's community.progress.com. And if you have other questions, feel free to let us know. We will get back to you. This is being recorded. Everyone who registered will receive a link to the recording. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be with us here today. And hopefully we've answered your questions and taught you a little bit more, or at least answered some of your burning questions about credentials. Thank you very, very much.